Welcome to the 2024 year ahead horoscope for Libra, Sun, and Rising. Now, I've written these specifically for your rising sign. You should be watching horoscopes from your rising sign, but of course, you can watch it from your sun sign or any other sign that you want to. So, pretty interesting year. 2024 is a buildup into 2025, and I think when you take that mindset, it makes 2024 make a lot more sense. And of course, you'll watch this and then, just make sure you subscribe to the channel to get to 2025. But let's first talk about just the major transits of 2024 first. Now, I already did a general overview of the year. So if you want to get my opinions of just about the general major transits of the year anyway, go ahead and watch that video. But the first big thing that we have going on is Pluto ingressing into Aquarius. This is happening on January 20th. And Pluto will be in Aquarius between January and September. It will retrograde back into Capricorn. But then by November 19th, Pluto will move into Aquarius, where it will stay for the next 2 decades. So this is kind of a big year for the Pluto and Aquarius stuff. And then on April 20th, Jupiter will conjoin Uranus. This is kind of the most exciting transit of this year. It's kind of interesting for you guys because it's in weird parts of your chart, but this is the best transit that we get of this year. It's super exciting, and we'll talk about it. Jupiter ingresses into Gemini on May 25th. Jupiter moves into a new zodiac sign every single year, and so this will be a lot about like spirituality and far distance travel and publishing, broadcasting. We'll get into that, as well as we get the Venus Cazimi in Gemini on June 24th. On June 4th. A lot of ninth house shifts for you guys happening this year. Like this late May, early June is a lot about spirituality, traveling, publishing, broadcasting, higher education. So I think that's really exciting. And then the big meta transit that we get for the year is going to be the Jupiter-Saturn square that we have. We have 2 of them. We do get a third one. The third one will be in 2025, but the first one is in August 19th. And then the second one is on Christmas Eve on December 24th. This is, the Jupiter and Gemini transit that we get comes with caveats, and that's what this Jupiter-Saturn square is. This is the caveats. And then we get the Mars retrograde in Leo and Cancer on December 6th. This is the worst transit of the year. But this is on December 6th. A lot of this is actually going to be happening more towards 2025. And of course, we will talk about it. But before we start talking about January and every single month, if you like this video, make sure you like it, comment below. I want to know what your favorite month is going to be, what month you're most excited for, and what month you're the least excited for. Let me know. And if you want to keep up to date with all of the transits for the year ahead, make sure you subscribe to the channel if you haven't already. Also, if you want to know when a transit is going to hit something in your birth chart and you want to know what it means, go ahead and go over to my website and download the transit calendar that I have for both iCalendar and Google Calendar. As you can see here, these little orange markers are actually indications of when something is happening. So for example, tomorrow at 7 p.m., Mercury is going to go opposite my Mars. I can click that and I can see the interpretation of what that's going to mean. It's all custom to your birth chart, and it's only $20. You don't have to open up an app and put in all these things. It's just right there on your calendar. It's super easy. I love using it personally. I actually like it a lot more than I was expecting to. So make sure to download that. Like I said, it's only $20 and it's going to help support my channel as well. If you want to get as clear of an idea of what 2024 and even 2025 into 2026 is going to look like for you, feel free to book a consultation with me. And of course, all of this is available at the website in the description below. So let's start talking about 2024. January. We're starting the year off with Mercury stationing direct. This is something I really like about 2024 is Jupiter stations direct on December 31st, and then Mercury stations direct on January 1st. So by this point, every single planet is direct and moving forward. So I feel like there's a real good energy of just being able to move forward and like that New Year's resolution kind of feeling of the beginning of the year. Now, Mercury stationed retrograde in your 4th house of home and family and living situation in Capricorn. And so there was some delays or miscommunications or some readjustments going on with your living situation and family. But then Mercury stations direct in your 3rd house of siblings, neighbors, and short distance travel. So when Mercury was like retrograde, it's kind of like maybe you had a lot of travel plans or miscommunications with neighbors or siblings that was a little bit hectic. That all gets resolved by the beginning of the month, or I should say the beginning of the year. And then the next transit that we get, and I'm going to pull up the chart to show all of this to you guys here in just a minute. But the next big transit we get is on January 4th. This is Mars ingressing into Capricorn. So Mars is going to enter your 4th house of home, family, living situation, and parents. So something to know as we go along here is it's going to be important to understand whether or not you are a day chart or a night chart, because in astrology, depending on if you're a day chart or night chart, Certain planets are more on your side and certain planets are less on your side. When we talk about the malefic planets, so these are the bad quote unquote planets, Mars and Saturn. If you are born in the day, which means the sun is above the horizon, so if you look at your birth chart, the ascendant and the descendant, if the sun is above that, that means you're a day chart, and if it's below that, you're a night chart. If you are a day chart, Mars is more problematic for you and it's not as fun, but Saturn is much more on your side, and we generally like Saturn. But if you're a night chart, it's reversed. Mars is much more on your side, and Saturn is much more not on your side and not as fun. So keep that in mind. So when we start talking about the transits, you kind of get a better idea of what this looks like. But Mars rules fights, conflicts, energy, ambition, drive, tenacity, and it's entering your fourth house of home and family. So number one, there might just be more fights and conflicts with your family, issues coming up with your living situation. But Mars is exalted in Capricorn, so it's like, that could be good for like getting things done at home, reconstructing things, doing those DIY projects. But it could be bad because Mars is like exalted in Capricorn. So like the fighting and the conflict is like, not weak. It's very strong. But you will see a lot of energy coming up at home. Maybe some fights and conflicts with your parents. And a lot of it's like Capricorn stuff, like order, rules, systems, regulations, that sort of thing. And then by the time we get to the end of the month, on January 20th is when Pluto enters Aquarius. Again, Pluto entered Aquarius originally between March of 2023 and somewhere between May and June of 2023. And I want you to think about that time related to your fifth house. So this is creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, hobbies, arts and crafts, music, recreation, and self-expression. Pluto rules power and fear and control and, transformation. And in this video, like, I'm not going to be able to fully encapsulate what Pluto and Aquarius in your fifth house is going to mean, because Pluto is going to go through your fifth house for the next 20 years. And if Pluto rules transformation, it's like, okay, like a 20-year-long transformation with all this fifth house stuff, right? But think about what was going on during that time. Again, between March and June of 2023. And what kind of vibe shift happened related to creativity or love and romance or even children? Because we're going to kind of come back to that. That leads me to February, and this is where I'm going to pull up the chart, because February is all fifth house stuff for you guys. Number one, we start February on the 13th with Mars ingressing into Aquarius and conjoining Pluto in your fifth house. So again, all of this stuff is fifth house related. So again, creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure, children, art, music, recreation, and hobbies. And so as we pull up the chart here, let me actually get to that. And then we want to get to the 13th. Whoops. Sorry, give me a second to get this chart up. Yeah, so Mars conjoining Pluto is like a revolt or like a revolution, because Mars is fights and conflicts, and it's in the sign of Aquarius, so like society and people and networks. But Mars conjoining Pluto is like a power surge. Like there's, if Mars is inflammation and fighting and separating and cutting, and Pluto is like power, fear, and corruption, Mars conjoining Pluto is like this real big power shift related to love, romance, sex, creativity, real intense energy. Like there's a lot of intense fifth house energy things or fifth house stuff going on. And I know that word intense gets thrown around a lot, but in this video, my job is to lay down the groundwork of what this year looks like for you. And it's your job to put the pieces together of what the context of your life is going to make it look like. And so Mars conjoining Pluto is some sort of like, doing something that is, that could be bad. Mars conjoining Pluto is like doing something that could be empowering or revolting against something. And again, this is all fifth house. So this could be like doing something different with love and romance, or maybe even getting angry and frustrated with your creative endeavors or creative expression. So that's what that looks like. And that continues when Venus conjoins Pluto on February 17th. Again, this is still in the fifth house. Now, Mars going into your fifth house is like fights, conflicts, and frustration related to love, romance, sex, pleasure, your children. Like if you got kids, they're going to be acting up during this time. But then when Venus goes in there, there's something like fun about it. Like the way I've been kind of thinking about Mars conjoining Pluto and Aquarius is like, you and a bunch of people, get upset and protest something. And then when Venus joins Aquarius, when Venus goes into Aquarius and conjoins Pluto, it's like, you start making friends with everybody. Like you start making more of a connection. And so with Mars and Venus in your 5th house, it's like there's a lot of energy there. There's a lot of drive there. You're wanting to do more fun things with bigger groups of people. And Mars is just like, yeah, let's, have fun, go crazy with it. And then Venus really brings the pleasure along with it. Now, what's interesting is Mars rules your 7th house of relationships, and it's going to be in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, creativity. So there's a big focus on like, what do you want in relationships? Maybe dating people, but it also rules your 2nd house of money, and Mars will be in your 5th house. So it's like there's something to do with money and finances and resources related to creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure. And Mars conjoining Pluto is feeling either very empowered by it, or like stopped by corrupted forces. But Venus will also join the gang. Venus is your ascendant ruler. So typically whatever Venus is doing is like what you're doing, because you are ruled by Venus. It's typically a bigger deal. And Venus is in her joy in the 5th house. So there will be a lot of fun in being able to express yourself and be creative and be romantic during this time. But Venus also rules your 8th house of other people's resources, death, debt, inheritance. So this looks like a lot of collaboration. Like Venus rules, it's your ascendant ruler of you and your 2nd ruler of money in your 5th house of creativity and love, romance, sex, and children. And it's your 7th ruler of relationships and your 8th ruler of like other people's money in the 5th house. So this seems like a very collaborative project with, something creative going on here. So again, when you guys are watching this throughout the year, comment below and let me know what ends up happening for you guys during this time. And then after that, again, the Pluto part is like the very powerful, transformative part. Pluto is going to make things go to an extreme. It is going to be transformative. And so just know there will be an extreme kind of like movement in there. But then when Venus conjoins Mars, this is much more about fun. Like, all right, we're doing this. We're having a lot more fun. The energy's a little bit settled down. Like it might just be a new and exciting thing that you do, but things get a lot more fun during this time. But then we get to the 27th and the 28th, and this is when we get the Mercury and Saturn cazimi. Now, each planet goes cazimi at least once a year. Mercury goes cazimi like 6 to 8 times, depending on, its retrograde cycle. And Saturn goes cazimi like once. A cazimi is when the sun conjoins a planet or when a planet conjoins the sun. And this indicates like that planet's topics being reborn. I always like to look at it as like that planet's birthday and the context of what that planet represents at that time, moving on into a new chapter. And so, for one, well, let's actually talk about Saturn. So the Saturn cazimi, Saturn has been in Pisces now since March of 2023. And Saturn has been in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines, labor, coworkers, and employees. Saturn is about responsibility, maturity, discipline, limitations, and restrictions. So there's been a lot more of a restrictive thing going on in this area for you, having to be more disciplined, more mature, and more responsible for your work, your labor, pets, coworkers, maybe more limitations and boundaries with them. And from March of 2023 until June of 2023, Saturn was direct, moving forward through Pisces. And the way I like to analogize this is like you start a new job and you're getting on the spot training. It's like, here are your new duties. Here are your new responsibilities. Like, you're kind of learning the ropes. And then Saturn stationed direct from June of 23 to November of 23. My bad. Saturn stationed retrograde from June of 23 to November of 23. And this is like, okay, you're not getting training anymore. You're on your own, and it's your first couple weeks on your own, and you're still learning. You're still trying to figure it out. Now you have to really take on the responsibility. An analogy that I'm going to continuously use throughout this video is Saturn being direct is like doing the classroom work, and then Saturn retrograde is like doing the field work. Like, okay, it all makes sense on a computer screen or in a classroom setting, but when you actually apply it in real life, there's a lot more obstacles and challenges that you'll have to face. So from June to November, it was kind of like, all right, you're not getting the on-spot training. You're still figuring things out. You're the one having to figure out, okay, what am I responsible for? How do I navigate this situation, XYZ? And then from November to here, Saturn was direct moving forward, but it was still in shadow. So at this point, you knew what your responsibilities were. You knew where you need to be more disciplined, more mature, and where the boundaries were, but you felt more comfortable taking them on. But as Saturn goes cazimi, it is now moving into new territory. It is out of its shadow. So this is the same thing. We're now taking on from here until June. This is about taking on new responsibilities and having more, having different limitations and restrictions regarding work, health, pets, and routines. And from here until June, you'll be being introduced to these things. Now, with the Mercury cazimi, And again, well, let's finish up on Saturn. Saturn rules your fourth house of home and family and living situation. And Saturn rules your fifth house of creativity, love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation. And it's in your sixth house of work. So, like, working from home, doing more creative things with work, that's kind of the deal here. But when we get to the Mercury Cazimi, Mercury, oh, whoops, I went a little bit too far back. But Mercury in your chart rules over your 12th house of isolation, alienation, hidden enemies, the subconscious, fears, phobias. And it also rules your ninth house of publishing, broadcasting, social media, spirituality, religion, far distance travel. And so when you're getting this new like work reset, you're also getting this Mercury Cazimi. And a Mercury Cazimi is like a fresh idea. It's like something is communicated to you and it's like, oh, here's this new idea I'm pursuing, or, I'm now working with this person or whatever it is. But the problem is Mercury's in detriment, where it's like you might receive some sort of a communication, some sort of a line of communication, but it's not really clear what it is. And it's 12th house too. Like, I wonder if there's any sort of like illness going on here, or if you guys are just low in health. 12th house too is like self-sabotage, and it's in detriment in the sixth. So like kind of fucking like saying something that maybe you shouldn't have said, or that you like didn't actually say with any clarity. That's kind of what this is about here. So it's like you're going to be receiving some sort of information that still isn't actually clear. So that brings us to March. And the way I've been trying to talk about this year is like January and February are like hustle grind mode, kind of same shit, different day. March is where things get weird. The first thing that we have going on in March is Mars is going to square Uranus. This is on March 9th. And again, this is Mars in your fifth house of sex, creativity, and Uranus is in your eighth house of other people's stuff, other people's money and resources. Now, Uranus has been in your eighth house since 2018. And Uranus is about liberation, freedom, instability, unexpected ups and downs, independence, but also like innovation. And so it's been in your eighth house of other people's resources, inheritance, debts, death. There's been a lot of like, back and forth and random events happening regarding other people's money. And so Mars, though, rules your second house of money, and it will be squaring. Let's get to March 9th. Oh, and let's change that back to Libra. Mars, though, rules your second house of money, and it will be in your fifth house of creativity, squaring Uranus, where it's like your own finances and related to other people. Like there's some sort of disruption with shared resources at this time regarding creative projects. So like we said in February, there's a lot of collaboration happening. This is where it becomes a little bit unstable. So you may not be able to rely directly on other people's resources. Like either you might fuck something up, or they might pull out, or something along those lines. But there's something unstable regarding relationships and money and creativity and that other person's resources. So watch out for that. Then we get to March 11th, and this is when we have Venus ingressing into Pisces. The reason this is a highlight is Venus is exalted in Pisces, and Venus is your ruling planet. Venus is about love, romance, connection, fun, indulgence, beauty. And when she's exalted, she does really, really well. Now, why I think this is important is because, for one, she's entering Pisces, so that's your sixth house of work, health, pets, routines. I think you'll be more on the up and up here. But why I think this is important is with Saturn being in your sixth house and there being so much more responsibility and heaviness regarding work and health and routine and pets and labor and stuff like that, Venus really lightens it up. Like Venus allows you to have more fun with it. Like I think January and February are just really like tough. Like they're just really serious. This really lightens up the attitude where you can still have fun, even though you still have to be more mature and disciplined in certain areas. This just alleviates that, and it creates a space for fun to occur. So after that, on the 18th, we get Mercury ingressing into shadow on March 18th. Now, this is happening in your seventh house of relationships. There is a lot of stuff going on with relationships for you guys in April, and this is when it all gets built up. So the seventh house rules relationships, partners, your spouse. Like if you're married, this has everything to do with your spouse and not necessarily you. But the seventh house also has to do with, oh, you guys can't see what I'm looking at here. Has everything to do with major individuals in your life as well. And so we will have a Mercury retrograde in your seventh house. So there will be miscommunications, delays, rethinking, reviewing, replanning regarding relationships. And this all kind of begins here when Mercury enters shadow. So pay attention to the 18th, because there's something that's going to be said or done on this day that you're going to come back to later on in April. Then that leads us to March 25th when we get the lunar eclipse in Libra. And this kicks off eclipse season, which eclipse season is like the wildest 2 weeks out of every 6 months. So this eclipse is happening in your first house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. And I've been telling the Libra risings, like, hey, you guys have the South Node in your first house. You are going to feel drained and exhausted. And the South Node in the first house is a good time to purge and get rid of things, change your diet, get rid of your wardrobe, things of that nature. But when we get to the 25th and we have this lunar eclipse here in your first house of the body, this is a big look at you and your body and what needs to be dumped, what needs to get rid of. And I want you to think about October 13th and 14th of 2023. That's when we had a solar eclipse in Libra. And that was maybe a big reset or a shift regarding your image, your identity, and your body. And that was kind of like planting a seed, because eclipses, like, again, end things and begin things in a very big way. And whatever like ended or began in October of 23, that was like a seed that gets planted that like brings things up to this point. And again, a lot of this is related to relationships, because again, the sun is in your 7th house of relationships. So when you get like eclipses in the 1st and the 7th, it's like you might meet someone. It's like, what are we? Who are you? That sort of thing. And the North Node is in your 7th. There's a lot of attention and energy going into relationships right now. So then we get to April, and April's when all of the craziness happens. On April 1st, we're going to have Mercury stationing retrograde, again, in your 7th house of relationships, partners, your spouse, and other bigger individuals in your life. And so Mercury retrograde is, again, delays, miscommunications, rethinking, reviewing, going back and forth regarding relationships. So, if you are married, this is kind of a bigger shift with your partner. Like, they may be doing bigger things, or they're having a big, personality change. Or if you're dating, or if you're, single, you might be seeing someone or dating someone by this point. But that brings us to April 8th, which is when we get the solar eclipse in Aries. Now, this is our first eclipse really in Aries that we get. And a solar eclipse is a much bigger deal, in my opinion, than a lunar eclipse. And it's, again, still happening in your 7th house. And this is a really big shift. Like, I think a lot of you that are single are getting into relationships. There's just a real big shift in the relationship at this point. Or your partner is going through a major, major shift, a new beginning, so to say. But why this eclipse is such a big deal, I mean, not only is Mercury retrograding in your 7th, there's an eclipse in your 7th, but that brings us to 2 days later on the 10th. And this is when Mars conjoins Saturn. This is in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines, labor, coworkers, things like that. But why this is a big deal is this eclipse / Mars-Saturn conjunction is ruled by Aries, by Mars. So while there's this eclipse that's ruled by the sign of by the planet Mars, Mars will be conjoining Saturn in your 6th house. Now, the easiest way to really understand this is looking back at 2020. Right when the lockdowns happened, like that same day, the end of March, Saturn ingressed into Aquarius. That was like a couple days before. And then Mars ingressed into Aquarius and conjoined Saturn. We had a Mars-Saturn conjunction. Now, Saturn rules like authorities and governments, and Mars rules like separating and cutting. And also Saturn rules like control, like lockdown. But it was in the sign of Aquarius, of like society and like, like stay at home, get away from people. That was a Mars-Saturn conjunction in Aquarius. Now, that was in your 5th house of love, romance, sex, pleasure, art, music, recreation, drugs, alcohol, vices, things like that. You can take that kind of same intense shift with what was going on in your 5th house in March and April of 2020 and put it into your 6th house. So work, labor, routine, health, day-to-day activities. There's some major like pressure point. There's some major like it's both of the malefic planets. So it doesn't matter if you're a day chart or a night chart. There's some, major separation. There's some major cutoff. There's some major restriction happening when it comes to work, labor, health, routines. And a lot of this is stemming from this eclipse and the stuff that's going on in your 7th house of relationships. So this is a really big deal. April's really the craziest time of this year. But that brings us to 10 days later on April 20th, on 420, which is when we have like the best transit of the year. So it's really weird that we have like this kind of like real gnarly stuff and then like an amazing transit like a week later, which is The Jupiter-Uranus conjunction happening in your 8th house of other people's money, death, debt, and inheritance. So the thing is with this is why I said earlier this is weird is that this is in your 8th house. The 8th house rules death, other people's money, shared resources, inheritance. It is your 3rd ruler of neighbors, siblings, aunts, uncles, cousins, short distance travel, communication, and technology. But it also rules your 6th house of pets, other work, labor, health, and that's conjoining. Like Jupiter is like 80% of the time Jupiter's good. 20% of the time, Jupiter's not so good, but Jupiter expands. Jupiter asks you, what is your faith? Are you grateful for this area? What are your beliefs in this area? And if Jupiter is expansion and abundance, and it's conjoining Uranus, the planet of like unexpected events, randomness, innovation, liberation, freedom, there's some sort of major event happening, regarding other people's resources, maybe related to short distance travel, siblings and neighbors, or from your work, that is like an expansion of other people's resources, or a random inheritance that you get, or maybe even a sudden death of like a pet or something like that. That's the vibe here. And so this will be good for like things like wealth and access to other people's resources. It may be bad because it's 8th house stuff. So again, if you're watching this throughout the year, I want you to comment below and let me know what ends up happening for you guys at this time. So then we get to April 30th, and this is when Mars goes into Aries. This is your 7th house ruler of relationships again. Now, Mars rules your 7th house of relationships, and it also rules your 2nd house of money. At this point, the relationship stuff gets turned on to like 11, meaning we had this whole eclipse here. We had this whole Mercury retrograde here. Mars going into your 7th house is like, now there's a huge focus on relationships. There's more energy here. Mars does rule fights and conflicts, so there might be more combativeness in the relationship if you're a day chart, but if you're a night chart, there's just more of like time and energy spent in a relationship. And I want you to think about the last time Mars was in Aries, which was around May and June of 2022. What was going on with relationships around May and June of 2022? Because this will be very, very similar. It will be pretty similar. I can't use a better way to describe that because that was like Jupiter. And anyway, so now there's a lot more energy being related to relationships. Same thing with like money should be doing a lot better at this time too, because your 2nd ruler is now in its domicile. And that's only going to intense as we get into May. Now, before I go into these transits of May, I just want to kind of show you something that's happening here. So when we get to the beginning part of May, I want you to notice everything that's in your 8th house. May, in my opinion, is the best month of this year. And again, this is weird for you guys because Venus is going to be in your 8th house. The sun's going to be in your 8th house, Uranus and Jupiter. Jupiter is a benefic planet. Venus is a benefic planet. Arguably, the sun is a benefic planet. But Uranus is kind of like back and forth. Like it really just depends on what Uranus is doing of whether or not it's good or bad. I would argue that with all these good planets that it's going to be really good. So there's all this really awesome stuff going on in your 8th house of like other people's resources, shared resources, death, debt, inheritance. Like there's something just being that's really good. And this is a weird area. So maybe you get some sort of early inheritance. Maybe you get, your credit card's paid off. I don't know what that's going to be. And again, this is why, because the 8th house is so personal. It's a private house and it's a hidden house. So like, just like you don't know how much money people have, like that's the 8th house. You can't always see things. So, all I can do in these videos is kind of lay down the groundwork, and then it's up to you to put the context together for your own life. So like I said, once we get to May, let me know what's going on for you in this area of your life. But the first thing that we have going on in May is on the 13th, we have Mercury leaving shadow. So now we're all done with this relationship stuff for the most part. Not all done with it, but more so like the miscommunications, the delays, the rethinking, the reviewing, the getting in one, that all ends. So whatever was going on March 18th, we come back to around May 13th. But then we have Mars conjoining the North Node on May 19th. And this is like Mars in Aries on the North Node in your 7th house is like, oh, let's get married. Like we just met 5 minutes ago, but let's get married. Let's do this. Let's do that. If you are in a committed relationship already, like if you are married, the South Node going through your 1st house is like, you're still drained and exhausted, but your partner's like got a lot of shit going on. Like they are very energized, very ambitious, maybe even problematic. Cause again, Mars does rule fights and conflicts. So there might be some frustration and aggravation there, but I find this more positive than anything, just intense. Then we get to May 25th, and this is when Jupiter ingresses into Gemini. Jupiter is going to enter your ninth house of spirituality, religion, higher education, and far distance travel. Now, this is good, but it comes with caveats, and there's a lot of things going on in your ninth house here as we get into May. So Jupiter, again, expands whatever it touches. So it's going to be expanding the part of your chart that rules things like spirituality, religion, far distance travel. Jupiter rules your sixth house of work, labor, routine. So maybe there's a part of work or, health stuff that involves traveling or education, or maybe you're getting more in touch with your spiritual side. But it also rules your third house. And yes, the third house rules siblings, neighbors, short distance travel, primary education. But a way I like to look at the third house is like, how do you utilize the knowledge that you have? And if Jupiter's in detriment in Gemini, like Jupiter in Gemini is like trying to do two things at once and struggling to like balance them. Although at this time right now, it's just like seizing the opportunity, like the opportunity's there. You're not going to be too stressed out about the balancing part. But the third house is like, how do you utilize the knowledge that you have? And if your third ruler is in detriment in the ninth of like higher education and that knowledge that you have, there's kind of this cognitive dissonance of like, I need to learn more because I don't know how to apply the knowledge that I already have. And so this is a big year of like learning and growing, especially in the spiritual area and the education area. And that starts at the end of May. So then we get to June and all of that continues. Because that was something I was going to say, but let me finish this real quick. All of that continues because on June 4th, we get the Venus Cazimi in Gemini. So this is, again, another big start. Venus is your ruling planet. And so a Venus Cazimi is going to be a bigger deal for you guys than most people. Now, in regards to Jupiter and Gemini, I want you to think about the last time Jupiter was in Gemini, and that would be summer of 2012. What was going on around summer of 2012 regarding spirituality, religion, higher education like colleges, far distance travel? Because that will give you a good idea of what this time is going to be like, because that was the last time Jupiter was in Gemini. Now, Venus goes retrograde in the same zodiac sign every 8 years, but she also has her exterior conjunction with the sun, otherwise known as her Cazimi, with Venus has goes Cazimi in the same zodiac sign every 8 years. So I want you to think about 8 years ago, about June of 2016, and what was going on around the end of May, beginning of June of 2016. Again, regarding spirituality, religion, higher education, publishing, broadcasting, social media, far distance travel, because this same theme is going to get brought up. And this is a bigger deal for you guys because you're ruled by Venus. And this looks like you are having a big new restart in some sort of education and some sort of travel, especially related to other people's resources and work and short distance travel. May and June are really exciting. Like May is really, really cool. And then June is just like a bigger shift. And this just looks, and I mean, like, look at this. Like we have Mercury now in Gemini, conjoining Jupiter in Gemini, this Venus Cazimi. Like a lot of stimulation, a lot of information, a lot of like traveling, a lot of going places and all of that kind of good stuff. So this is really exciting. Then on June 8th, Mars ingresses into Taurus. Mars rules your second house of money, and it will be in detriment in the 8th house of other people's money and death and debt. So I want you to think about the last time Mars was in Taurus, which was about July to August of 2022. And what was money like for you at that point? Because Mars being in Taurus, let me fix this here. Mars, again, ruling your second house of money, is in detriment in the 8th house, where it's like you are limited. You are stuck using other people's resources for your own money. Like your second ruler in detriment in the 8th is like you are the breadwinner and all of your money is going to your spouse, or like you are broke and you are reliant on other people's resources for your own income. And in a way that's really slow. Like Mars in Taurus is slow. It's not fast. It's not energized. Same thing with relationships. Like Mars does rule your 7th house of relationships, and it'll be in detriment in the 8th, where like there might even be some conflicts around money, conflicts like just stubbornness and, being a little bit irritated with your relationship with your partner at this time. So that's a little frustrating. But then we get this Mercury Cazimi happening on June 14th. Again, all in your 9th house, same stuff, spirituality, religion, education, far distance travel. And the big thing here is, like, we just had Jupiter ingress into Gemini. We just had the Venus Cazimi in Gemini. And then the ruler of Gemini, Mercury, also goes Kazemi. So it's like from the end of May to the first 2 weeks of June, it's just all supercharged ninth house stuff. So traveling, spirituality, going back to school, publishing, broadcasting, all types of cool stuff. We like that. The Mercury Kazemi just continues it. But then we get to the 30th of June, and that's when Saturn stations retrograde. Again, this is back in your 6th house of work, health, pets, routines, labor, coworkers. So like I said before, since February, Saturn has been direct, moving into new territory. You've been learning what exactly new responsibilities you will have, what new restrictions and limitations you will have, what kind of boundaries you need to set. And as Saturn goes retrograde, this is going from the classroom to the field and being like, okay, now that I know what this is going to look like, I actually just have to implement these things. So as Saturn goes retrograde, there will be a little bit of a slowdown in work. There will be a little bit more like heaviness in the responsibility that you have with your work and your health and labor and routines and things like that. And we'll be talking more about that as we move forward. So we get to July. The big thing is January through like July, or January through June is really like the craziest time this year. The summer really slows down, and things don't really pick back up to about November, December. So when we look at July, sorry, I needed a water break. So when we look at July, Mars conjoins Uranus. This is happening on July 15th. Again, in your 8th house of other people's money, death, and debt. I really want you to think about August 1st of 2022. That was the last time we had a Mars-Uranus conjunction. And like what that looks like for you is like instability regarding other people's money, other people's resources, and your own money. Because if we look here, let me switch it back. Because your 2nd house ruler of money is in detriment, the 8th house of other people's money. And then it conjoins Uranus where it's like unstable, or all of a sudden you lose it, or all of a sudden it goes away, or, you know, all of a sudden, you know, you're already just getting by and then a big major expense happens. Same thing with your 7th house ruler of relationships. That's going to conjoin Uranus where there's like a big random like snapping moment maybe within the relationship, or your partner just has a really tough time, maybe even with their expenses. It's just money seems really frustrating for both you and your relationship, and things are moving slow. And then it's like right when you don't need a bigger expense, a big expense happens. So pay attention for that. Save up your money while you get some. Then Mercury is going to ingress into shadow on July 16th, the next day. Mercury will retrograde in Virgo, which rules your 12th house of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, fears, and hidden enemies. But Mercury will retrograde back into Leo, which rules your 11th house of friends, networks, and communities. So while Mercury is in your 11th house of friends, there's a lot of socializing with friends, being probably more, you know, communicating more with friends. But when Mercury enters shadow on the 16th, something's going to be said, or some idea is going to be had where like maybe you have a falling out of a friend. Maybe you stop really hanging out with a certain group of people. Not so much like last summer was, summer of 2023, but this is kind of like being like, who are my friends and who are my enemies? And that kind of theme starts on the 16th. But then we get to July 20th, Mars enters Gemini. Again, Mars is entering your 9th house of spirituality, religion, education, far distance travel. You guys know the deal by now. And as this happens, Mars going into your 9th house is now bringing a focus about relationships and money related to higher education, far distance travel, spirituality, religion. You can think about October of 2022 through March of 2023. That was when we had a Mars retrograde in Gemini. Now that sucked. That was bad. And that's not what this is. But, you know, a lot of that time I'd have been going back and forth with like, what do I believe? And shaking your fist at God and being frustrated and just, again, going back and forth and trying to juggle things like social media or publishing or your beliefs or school and work. And that's kind of the same vibe here. Like Mars is, again, like frustrations, and Mars and Gemini is also a lot of stimulation, like arguing with words related to 9th house. So being more active on social media, like, you know, replying to people and fighting in the comments essentially. And that's going to become important for August. This isn't as important right now. That just happens, but that will become important once we get to August, which is what we're going to talk about. I need another water break. So August, Mercury stations retrograde in your 12th house, again, of isolation, alienation, the subconscious, hidden enemies. So as Mercury was in shadow in your 11th house of friends, it goes retrograde in your 12th house, where I just feel like a part of this is like maybe a falling out with a friend, maybe finding like a friend wasn't actually a friend. There's some sort of sabotage here. Maybe you're the one that does the self-sabotage. Maybe you're the one that like realizes things. That's kind of what's going on here. And especially if any of this has to be related to far distance travel. Like if you're in a different country with a friend, like your 9th ruler is retrograding in the 12th, like this might be like, oh, I shouldn't have made this trip with this friend, kind of a thing. But then on August 14th, we get Mars conjoining Jupiter. And this is actually really important. So August 14th, Mars conjoins Jupiter, again, in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, education, far distance travel. Why this is important is this sets us up for the next big thing. But Mars conjoining Jupiter is like a big explosive event. Like things just blow up. Things just almost get like out of control. Especially with like any sort of fights, conflicts related to possibly short distance travel, work, labor, routines, pets. This is just like things like Jupiter and Gemini is trying to juggle things. You're trying to juggle the short distance travel and the work and the labor and spirituality and traveling and publishing. And Mars conjoining Jupiter is like this kind of being a big bubble popping. Mars does rule your 2nd house of money and your 7th ruler of relationships, and it's conjoining your 6th ruler of work in the 9th house, where it's just kind of like, you know, an explosive, like all of a sudden I'm doing this and I'm doing that, and like it's overwhelming. And so why this is important is the next transit we get is the Jupiter-Saturn square that happens on August 19th. And like I said in the beginning, this is like the meta transit for the year. This is like this overarching thing for the year. And the thing is with this, while Jupiter's in your 9th house and Saturn's in your 6th house, Jupiter is all about like opportunities and faith and belief, but Saturn's all about Oh, sorry for that. I don't know if you heard that, but I have like one of those old school red alarm clocks with the horrible alarm, and it went off and it totally scared the bejesus out of me. So anyway, Jupiter's about like opportunities and seizing the opportunities and expanding, but Saturn's about like responsibilities. Like Jupiter expands, Saturn restricts. Saturn what's the opposite of expand? I keep forgetting what that word is. But when this Mars Jupiter conjunction happens, like so much happens that then Saturn squares Jupiter, and Jupiter is direct, right? Jupiter's trying to seize the day. Jupiter's trying to take these opportunities with the traveling and the publishing and the social media and the college. But then Saturn being retrograde is like Saturn being retrograde is like, okay, now you're really having to face like, what are my responsibilities? What are my duties? What are my limitations? What are my restrictions? What are my boundaries? And this is where you kind of start to connect the dots of like, oh, this is going to be much harder to balance than I anticipated. I don't know if I'm going to be able to do all these things I want to while still remaining responsible and mature of the areas of my life that I need to. And this is important because that solution or that like change of heart comes in December. But this is the moment you realize, oh, I can't do both of these things while still maintaining like the level of responsibility I have to maintain. So this is kind of a big wake-up call that will take you a couple months to work through. We get to September. September is super boring. Pluto goes back into Capricorn. Okay, going back to home, living situation, parents. It's been there for like 16 years, so like I'm not going to talk about it much. Venus conjoins the South Node, though. We had a Venus South Node conjunction in Libra late November of 2023. And this is happening again in your 1st house. Again, this is happening on the 3rd, but it's happening in your 1st house of you, your body, yourself, your image, your identity. This is a low point. This is feeling exhausted. This is having to get rid of, again, your wardrobe or change your diet or you're losing weight. But Venus in Libra is like, this is nice. What I have is nice. I look nice, but I don't want it anymore. I don't like this anymore. Like Venus in Libra is like pleasures and art and beauty, but it's in domicile. Like it's not that it's not beautiful, but it's just on the South Node where it's like, but I just don't like this anymore. This doesn't spark joy. And so there's something about like maybe changing your wardrobe, changing your looks, changing your diet, working out more, whatever that is. That's what's going on here. Very low point in the energy too for you guys. But then Mars enters Cancer on September 4th. This is a pretty big deal because, again, Mars is fights and conflicts, inflammation and energy, and it's going into your 10th house of career, reputation, legacy, but Mars will enter its sign of fall. Mars does not do well in the sign of Cancer. Mars is about the warrior. Cancer is about like babies and nurturing and protecting. Mars in Cancer is going to be very being on the defense, being very defensive. You can think about April of 2023 and what was going on in April of 2023, because that was the last time we had Mars going through Cancer, and what was going on with career and work for you guys, especially related to money. Mars rules your second house of money, and it's going to be fallen in your 10th house, where this is just kind of like, you're making enough to get by, and you're going to have to hustle each time to make what you need to make. And it's also your 7th ruler of relationships in fallen in the 10th, where like there might be more obvious problems to the relationship, and all relationships have problems. No one's perfect. But it's just more obvious and aware, and there's more crabbiness and emotional reactions and defensiveness going on here. And that will become important as we keep moving on. We get to October. We go back to eclipse season. We get a solar eclipse in Libra on the 2nd. And again, this is in your first house of you, your body, your image. Think about October 13th, 14th of 2023. That was the last time we had a solar eclipse in Libra. So there might have been a significant change to your body, your image, maybe a low point for you guys. So some sort of significant change related to your body, yourself, your image, or a low point. We get another one of these. This is just a big, when the South Node is through your first house, it's just a big cleanup of the body and image and looks and things like that. It's a lot of purging, and this is kind of like the end of it, but it's like the last one. Then on October 4th, 2 days later, Mars enters shadow. And so we will get a Mars retrograde in Leo, but it will go back into Cancer. And so there's going to be things revolving your career around this time that are going to, like, some problems that are going to come up that you're going to revisit once we get to March of 2025. Like, Mars stations retrograde in December. It'll be retrograde until March of 25, and it doesn't leave shadow until like July of 25. So this is why I was saying like 2024 is a buildup into 2025. Like, and trust me, as we go along, it will all make more sense. But Mars enters shadow. Whatever is going on the 4th is going to become very relevant in a few months from now. So like March of 2025. And this is, again, problems in the career, crankiness in the career, not wanting to do certain things, having to be very protective and defensive, being like, I need to do something different. This isn't working for me. What else can I do? Especially related to money, because money will be a little bit tighter around this time. Then on October 9th, Jupiter stations retrograde. Again, it's still in your 9th house of spirituality, religion, higher education, far distance travel, social media, broadcasting, publishing. This is when, again, this is very similar to doing like schoolwork versus doing the field work. And as Jupiter goes retrograde, this is like when everything's going your way, it's much easier to have faith and confidence. But when everything's not going your way, do you still remain faithful? Do you still have gratitude? And so Jupiter going retrograde is like, we're no longer expanding this area. It's expanded enough. Now we need to kind of consolidate. And Jupiter retrograde is like, it's not, there's not going to be all this fun stuff here. It is like, okay, schoolwork, everything is easier when it's on paper, but when you actually apply it in real life, how much more difficult is it? So there is going to be this slowdown with things related to work, things related to short distance travel, maybe questioning a lot more of your beliefs during this time. And again, this is kind of stuff stemming from August of like, how do I seize the opportunities, but also still be mature and responsible? And this is where you might be like, okay, maybe I can't do both of these things. Maybe both of these things won't actually end up working. Then we get to, okay, so technically this is an eclipse. Okay. We start to get our eclipses in Virgo and Pisces around this time. But to be honest with you, I think that's a bigger deal for 2025, and I have a lot of reasons why, so I'm not going to go into it. But this isn't really an eclipse, but it's the full moon in Aries on the 17th in your 7th house of relationships. And we're coming back to what started in April. Who the hell are you dating? What's going on with your partner? This is a big what are we moment, because it's also squaring Mars. Mars rules your 7th house. Mars is in Cancer and it rules the moon, and it's being eclipsed / full moon in your 7th. So this is like a big turning point in the relationship related to career topics specifically. So then we get to November. November is where things pick a little bit back up. Mars goes into Leo on the 3rd, and it's in your 11th house of friends, networks, and communities. Mind you, Mars is in Leo. Mars in Leo is, like walking with pride, being very full of yourself, confident, borderline arrogant. but in like a bold, passionate way. I would think about like May of 2023. That was the last time we had Mars in Leo. Mars in Leo, of course, can be fights and conflicts with friends, but Mars in Leo is feeling confident with friends, acting out more with friends, your relationships connected to your networks and your friends, and your second house ruler of money connected to your friends. But Mars is in shadow, so remember that. We're going to talk about that in just a minute. You'll probably will feel more confident, but not for long. Mercury goes into shadow on November 7th. This is going to be a retrograde in your third house of siblings, neighbors, and short distance travel, communication. So there will be a lot of reorganization of your time and, going here, going there, all during this time. It will be probably frustrating because Mercury will be in detriment. So it's like, are we doing this? Are we doing that? I'm not really sure. Just another Mercury retrograde. But then Pluto goes back into Aquarius on November 19th. Again, back into your fifth house of creativity, love, children, hobbies, all that fifth house stuff that we've already talked about. So from November of 2024 to July of 2025, Pluto moves into Aquarius, Neptune moves into Aries, Uranus moves into Gemini, Saturn moves into Aries, and Jupiter moves into Cancer. Every single major planet moves into a new zodiac sign by 2025. So there is a real, 2025 is a major shift happening. A major change in everyone's lives. And 2024 builds us up for that. That's why I've been saying this. And so that all starts here. But again, this is kind of returning to what was going on in January and February, right? Then by the time we get to November 15th, I know these dates. I know I just talked about the 19th and I just went to the 15th, but deal with me. I messed this up. On November 15th, Saturn stations direct. You know what you must do now. Work, health, pets, routines. This is when, Saturn was moving direct between, November of 23 to June of 24. And you're like, all right, here's the new areas of my life where I need to be more responsible, more mature, more disciplined. Then from June to November is like, okay, this is actually a little bit of a struggle. Being this disciplined, consistent is a little bit difficult. By this point, you feel more comfortable in being like, okay, this is what I have to do. This is what my responsibilities are. And I feel more comfortable accepting them, which will be important for December, which we'll talk about. And then, of course, by the end of the month of November, Mercury stations retrograde on the 25th. Again, miscommunication with siblings, with neighbors, short distance travel plans getting fucked up. But what's really interesting about this to me is going back to that whole Jupiter's in your ninth house, and it's about applying the knowledge that you already have. Your third ruler, Jupiter, is in detriment in the ninth, and your ninth ruler, Mercury, is in detriment in the third. So Mercury and Jupiter are opposites. They are opposite each other, and they're both in each other's signs. Very crisscross. This is kind of like being okay, if I believe these things, how do I need to change what I do every day in order to work with that? This is kind of that cognitive dissonance, trying to be trying to just put all the pieces together, especially when it comes to spirituality and your knowledge and your education and just applying it and knowing how to do it. This Mercury retrograde is really funny to me. I don't think it's going to be that bad, but it's funny. So then we get to December, and then the first thing we have is on December 6th, Mars stations retrograde. Like I said, Mars in Leo, it's going to be focused on friends, networks, and communities. And Mars in Leo going retrograde is so tail tucked between your legs, the, discouragement, low confidence. Let me do this. Low confidence, all bark, no bite. And it just seems like a really big slowdown and change regarding friendships and community and networks. Same thing with money. Your second ruler of, and again, because once we get to 2025, Mars will retrograde, which again, Mars was your second house of money, retrograde back into your 10th house and fallen. So it's there's some bigger changes going on with your wider community and networks and career at this time, but also relationships. Mars does rule your 7th house of relationships, and it's retrograde in the 11th house, where it's your friends or your community might change based off this relationship, or your relationship might change based off of who your friends are. And Mars in Leo is maybe you're hey, I'm dating this person. Everyone's they're ugly. That's stupid. What are you doing? And it's a lot of discouragement, a lot of tail tucked between your legs. Now, let me just say, this sounds bad, and it is going to suck. But when we get through 2025 and 2026, everything gets better in this area. Jupiter will transit through your 10th house. You'll make a lot more money in 2025 and 2026. And in 2026, friends will be a lot better. So just calm down a little bit. Mercury stations direct by the 16th. We're all sorted out with this whole communication jargon. But then we have that Jupiter-Saturn square, that second one I told you about on Christmas Eve. Again, 9th house, 6th house stuff. And the way that I've been thinking about this is pretty much like, okay, the first Jupiter-Saturn square was like, I'm trying to take advantage of these opportunities and do both of these things. But then Saturn being retrograde is like, oh, I'm the cognitive dissonance of like what I actually have to be responsible for and what opportunities I have like hits you. And then this is where you're like, okay, maybe I can't do both of these things. Maybe I can't take the opportunities here, but I like know what I have to do now. Like Saturn squaring Jupiter is like, I'm more mature and more responsible. This is what I have to do. And because of that, like I might have to restrict or limit what access to opportunities I have when it comes to travel, education, social media, spirituality, religion, all of that stuff. And that's this year, guys. Let me know in the comments below what month you are looking forward to, what month you are not looking forward to. Make sure you like this video. It does help out the channel. Check out my Patreon if you want to support the channel and get exclusive content as well. Download that transit calendar. It's so helpful in terms of just knowing when a planet is going to hit your chart without having to open an app. It's just right there on your phone. As well, if you want to know what is going to be going on in 2024 and 25 and even in 2026, feel free to book a consultation with me at the description below. And with that being said, I love and appreciate every single one of you, and I'll be seeing you next time.